I used to do lots of things.
I used to do things and I'd say things and Jesus I was evil. Take things and break things and Jesus I was evil. I never shook baby.
All right, Ben, you said that you want to do most of the talking for this episode. You said that your voice was feeling better than usual.
I'm a sick boy today. Not really. I'm getting. I mean, I was quite sick 2 days ago. Well, late 2 days ago. Yesterday. So I'm on the mend.
What was it? AIDS?
It was AIDS. Yeah,
Oh,
actually.
Nice.
Yes.
Cool. Well, I mean, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear you got AIDS.
Yep.
So no. So was it COVID then? Was it just?
I have no idea what it was.
Yeah.
But it was not pleasant.
Okay. Well, so I wanted to start off. So we do have a topic for this, but I wanted to point something out, and this is something I actually talked to my roommate Zach about, who's a comedian. So there's this thing, and I want to know if you've noticed this obnoxious thing that's been happening a lot in comedy shows and comedy movies lately, where it's like you have a lot of scenes where it's almost like a Seinfeldian thing, where it's like, here's an everyday situation, kind of like an annoying situation, but then instead of there being like a funny punchline, it's just like it just goes on and on and on. And you're like, okay, this is just more like the writer trying to like lecture society about like, don't do this. Whereas what Seinfeld did. So here, I'll give you a more specific example.
Yeah.
There's I don't know if this was a movie or show, but I know it had Bill Burr, and the scene was him. He's at a motel and he's smoking a cigar on the balcony, and then like the hotel manager comes up to him and he's smoking. He's got a vape, and he goes, "Excuse me, sir, there's no smoking on the premises." And then Bill Burr says, "Well, why the fuck not? You're smoking, so how come I can't smoke?" He goes, "Well, technically, it's not smoking; it's vaping." He goes, "Well, what the fuck's the difference? Like, you're smoking, I'm smoking. Like, if you can do it, I can do it." And then it just kind of goes on and on and on about, "Hey, you're smoking, I'm not smoking," and just kind of like, did the writer go, "This happened to me once, and I want to lecture hotel managers for." You know what I mean? But it's like, if this was handled in a Seinfeldian way, it would be like boom, 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 right? But instead, it was just like an extended rant, and it was just sort of like, so I asked my roommate Zach about this, and he goes, "This is something that a lot of comedy writers and comedians have been talking about for the last few years, where it's
really? Okay.
Yeah, it's not just because like I know the laugh track in sitcoms is kind of outdated, but at the very least, it forced you to write in like set up punchline, right?
Yeah.
But now with the extended form, like long form television, now it's like you can just have a scene that just drags on and on. It's like, okay, it's kind of awkward cringe comedy, but it's just it feels lazy, and it feels more like the writer is just trying to like lecture people about like, hey, don't be that kind of guy in person in real life. Don't be the cashier who doesn't take blah blah blah. You know what I mean? Like, have you noticed that at all?
I nothing comes to mind when you were just blathering on about it. I was trying to think of examples. I can't, but it's definitely something I'll be on the lookout for. I feel like also now there's so few pure comedies,
right?
That is starting, by the way, I think, to come back, which is good.
Yeah.
Really, since the early 2010s was the last time we had like pure comedies, like Get Into the Greek, Bridesmaids, and then it just kind of went dormant for years. I think a lot of that had to do with cancel culture, with woke shit, like things, it's not funny when you can't address sexual things, race things, like those are funny things. Those are funny topics that is kind of bread and butter of all comedy. Taboos, right? And when you're browbeating about taboos, then that's you lose a lot of comedy fodder. But now I am noticing that starting to come back, so I will be on the lookout for it. But no, I can't think of any examples off the top of my head.
Yeah, there was some other show too that did this. Again, I don't remember the exact show, but it had that guy. He's the main actor in Office Space. So that actor, he's on some show recently. But there was not Kyle Chandler, but he looks like Kyle Chandler.
The guy from like Band of Brothers.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah, it was Ron Livingston, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's him.
Yeah.
There was some show he was on recently. Same thing, some comedy show. But like, so he goes to a coffee shop. and he goes to the cashier and goes, "Hey, so instead of tea, can you just give me a cup of hot water? I brought my own tea bag because I don't like the tea that you guys. So I just brought my own tea bag. Can you just give me a cup of hot water and then just charge me for the full amount?" And the cashier goes, "I'm sorry, sir, we can't do that." And he goes, "Well, how come it's just give me a cup of hot water? You have hot water and pay me, and I'll charge you the full amount. Like I'll brought my own tea bag." And he goes, "I'm sorry, sir, we just don't do that. That's against the rules here." And then same thing. Then Livingstone's character just goes on and on and on, and all of a sudden it's like what Seinfeld did so great was that if this was done on an episode of Seinfeld, the cashier would be seen as the bad guy. That'd be seen as like, don't be the person who won't, bend the rules just one time. But because comedy has gotten so fucking verbose, now it's the guy the guy who brought his own tea bag. He's going on this long rant, but he's holding up the line. He's he's being presented to us as the hero. But I'm just sort of like, you're holding up the line. Like, yeah, it's kind of like, and the cashier is kind of an awkward jerk for not giving you this cup of water. But at the same time, you're making a weird request, and you're the one yelling about it. This isn't funny anymore. This is just
you're saying in Seinfeld, who would be the more sympathetic person?
I think the more sympathetic character would be the customer. Because, but like, or at least the way they would present it. But at the same time, it's just like the guy who's yelling and making a big deal and stopping the whole line. It's like, you're the bad guy here. You're the one being really obnoxious. And again, because comedy is it's more just being verbose rather than like snappy one-liners, get the point. Yeah, and it's like that new long form style of television, which can be great, which can be nice to have like overarching narratives now. But now it's like, you just have writers like, hey, how can we take this social situation and just and I can use this as an example to lecture society about how awkward people can be, how annoying people can be in real life. I don't know. So I was just talking to Zach about it, and because he's a comedian, but he also kind of dabbles in comedy writing, like TV writing and stuff. And he goes, yeah, no, that's actually a problem. Like that's something that a lot of writers have been and comedians have been pointing out like last few years. So anyway. I'm very picky about dialogue. So when I see something just going on and on and on, I'm like, okay, just give me a one-liner. Like there's got to be a punchline here. But anyway, so that's Joe's. Was it? Yeah. Was that?
I said you're a purist.
I am. Yeah. But anyway, so keep an eye out for that, Benjamin.
I'll report back.
Yeah. Okay. So the main topic for this episode. So I we've talked about Salman Rushdie multiple times, and we talked about the incident in which he was stabbed on stage during a live event. So I just found out from this article that the man who stabbed him, his name is Hadi Matar, from New Jersey.
No, we're not setting our best. I think I knew that too.
He was recently sentenced to 25 years in prison. Which
doesn't seem like enough, to be honest.
Yeah, and there's another 7-year sentence that he was given as well, but that's going to be run concurrently because he also injured the moderator as well. But it's being run concurrently, or he's going to be serving it concurrently. So that kind of seems like kind of a
25 years. Well, that's a lot. Like Rushdie lost sight of his eye.
Yeah, and part of his hand, and he was hospitalized, and he was pretty serious for a while. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with concurrent sentences if they're like 103,000 years. So, yeah, you can condense that down a little bit. Yeah. But yeah, so hold on. So I just want to read a little bit from this piece of shit. So I'm actually quoting from The Guardian, which just focuses more on the legal side of it, real quick.
Okay.
Matar's conviction followed an intense trial during which Rushdie, 77, detailed the moment when he felt certain that he was going to die from Matar's attack during a literary gathering in Western New York State in 2022. The author was severely wounded and lost the use of his eye. In a statement delivered to court before sentencing, Matar said, Salman Rushdie wants to disrespect other people. He wants to be a bully. He wants to bully other people. I don't agree with that. So this is a Muslim extremist. But if you didn't know that, is there any other group that's somebody whose members would say something like that? So that brings me to the main article that we're going to be discussing. So this is in Spiked. Rushdie's attacker, a warrior for cancel culture. The stabbing of Salman Rushdie revealed a chilling affinity between violent Islamism and woke intolerance. And this is by Mick Hume. So no doubt nobody told Matar to try to murder Rushdie or assisted him in stabbing the author of the Satanic Verses 15 times on stage in New York. He alone is responsible for that attack. But the Islamist knife man's own statements suggest that he was motivated by a hatred of free speech that is shared by many among the West's woke elites today. When it comes to believing that people should be punished for using insulting words, and particularly for criticizing Islam, Matar is far from alone. In trying to murder Rushdie, he effectively acted as the armed extremist wing of Western cancel culture. Matar did not give evidence in his February trial, where he was found guilty of attempted murder and assault. Before being sentenced last week, however, the assailant stood and made a revealing statement to the court. He said that he supports free speech, but also believes in a difference between attacking things that are sacred and freedom of speech. He said he values respect, whereas Salman Rushdie wants to disrespect other people. He wants to be a bully. He wants to bully other people. I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
I believe in free speech, but
Yeah.
the creed occur of just about every Anglo-American liberal in our censorious times. The buts he wants to attach to restrict free speech include words that disrespect and insult others, otherwise known as offensive and hateful speech by key leftist excuses for censorship.
Yeah. So, to comment on that, like, clearly this logic, I think a big issue that a lot of people on the right have, because the right, as we've seen, a lot of the so-called free speech absolutists and defenders of free speech during like this wokeopolis that went on for so many years, a lot of them really aren't the absolutists they pretended to be.
Right.
And I'm not a free speech absolutist either, by the way, because
right.
I don't think I don't think people really know what that means when they say it. But in this context, I think what people on the right accurately point out is that this logic is not then applied to very often them. Well, all of them, if it's politically, right? Like, you could insult as many Republicans or right wingers as you want, regardless of their race, religion, right? Like, we saw that how many white liberals after the election were talking about deporting all the Latinos and Muslims who voted for Trump, who were saying like overtly racist things to these groups and others. That is not the like, they don't apply that logic both ways, which I think is wrong. Like, if you're going to have a rule, then you have to apply it across the board. So, I mean, straight white men were the butt of every joke for like 15 years. Insulting things, right? Like, and things that did, I think, have negative impacts on society. Men overall, and anything that wasn't straight white men, but then it was also Latino men got put into that. Then it was like, literally, a headline was like, black men are the white men of black people. Like, and you can just keep, applying it down the line. And that's not what he meant. The point of all this is to say that, like, this never applies to your group. Right. When you use it. So he, I'm sure, could desecrate verbally any other religion. I'm sure he's not the most the kindest to the Jews, let's say. I would love to get his views on the Israel-Palestine conflict. But of course that would be okay, because the Jews are in kind of a weird position in the oppression Olympics pyramid, and I think they thought they were on one part of it, and then October 7th happened and they realized they were on a different part of it. That's for a different day. They have talked about that, but my point being is that this is the epitome of the slippery slope argument, which is why you can't have these guardrails unless they are really clear and in law, like doxing, for instance, or threats of like overt threats of violence. Like, these are things that are not free speech. Incitement to violence, which is a very high bar, by the way, but it does exist. Like that is, and which is not free speech. So outside of those issues, he just says insulting things, and there are a lot of these countries that more and more people from these countries come to. I'll say in the royal, and using the royal hour countries that are much more honor, like honor countries. A lot of these are South Asian and Middle Eastern, North African, Sub-Saharan African, I'm not exactly sure if South American would count as that, but they are much different, where it's like your honor, or even East Asian, but these are there's literally what's called honor killings.
Yep.
And they're somewhat tolerated. It's not overtly tolerated. They're much more tolerated than they would be in our societies.
Yeah.
So also liberal. Yeah, let's keep having these people come in.
Yeah,
that's a good job.
Well, I also have to wonder how many Islamists would continue to hate Salman Rushdie if they actually read the Satanic Verses. I mean, I know that it's sort of just like against certain sects of Islam that the Prophet Muhammad is not depicted. But I also wonder like how many of them have actually read the Satanic Verses and were like, yeah, no, he actually I stand by my initial.
I think a infinitesimally tiny percent. I think almost none.
Yeah.
Like I'm being dead serious. Like it's 0.001 like almost zero, because I don't think in a lot of these countries, or even in Western countries, like they wouldn't be caught dead reading it. They wouldn't. Maybe they'd see a passage or something online, but no, I've read it. I have it on my bookshelf.
Yeah.
I didn't, but the Muhammad also married like a 9-year-old or something.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's just like historical fact.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think he died with her. I forget her name. So I mean, if you want to use relativism or whatever, times were different, but that seemed pretty young for the times too. Because I think he was like in his 40s or 50s or something.
So I just want to read this real quick. This is again from the Guardian article. Matar's motivation for trying to kill Rushdie stemmed from a 2006 speech delivered by Hezbollah's chief at the time, Hassan Nasrallah, according to a federal indictment. In his speech, Nasrallah endorsed a decades-old fatwa or death warrant placed on Rushdie by Iranian religious leaders more than 35 years ago as a result of his novel, The Satanic Verses. Following Rushdie's stabbing, Matar admitted in 2022 to having read only a couple pages of the book, which Iranian religious leaders denounced as blasphemous. So, in 2020, I started this series that I really should finish, but it's called Nazism and Wokeness, and it's not saying that woke people are modern day Nazis, but I was pointing to a lot of the stark similarities between the two, specifically with regards to the arts. So I don't know if you remember this. At Georgetown University, students were going through like the school library and removing books that they thought were offensive. So this is in 2020. I'll just read.
I would just throw out like Pride and Prejudice because it's boring as shit.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's what sucks. I'd actually be okay. I'm put me on the record for I'm okay with removing Pride and Prejudice from libraries.
Yeah, I do like Sense and Sensibility though. That was a pretty good one.
Actually,
yeah.
Oh, I
read it of my own volition too. Like I read like when I was 24 or something like that. Like
really,
not for an assignment, just because I was like, I have it.
I think that's the gayest thing you've ever said.
So I have here an excerpt from the Epoch Times, which covered that stupid story. A student staff member of the publication noticed a book that prominently featured a Native American woman on its cover on a bookshelf at McCarthy Library.
Get it out.
I know. This prompted other staff members to examine every single book in the room, and they determined by looking at book covers that at least one half, if not all of the shelved books, contain racism, sexism, misogyny, homophobia, fetishization, and pedophilia. The students continued their book hunt in another library in Reynolds Hall, where they located more similarly problematic books. We'd like to add that we haven't read the insides of these books. Again, the entire swath of evidence for the problematic nature of these books is based on the front and back covers.
I mean, they're literally like judging and jury executioning these books on their cover.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what would not do well in this procedure? It would be like 1960 sci-fi novels.
Yeah,
with like buxom maidens, like holding on to astronaut cowboys,
or like 1940s like pulp fiction crime novels. Yeah.
Which are great covers. I love like those old classic, even not even old, just like there's a whole subgenre of just sci-fi books. You go to like a library, like I used to go to the library where I used to work, the county library, and it was really stupid, by the way, because I didn't live in that county, but I worked in that county, but they like wouldn't give me a library card. I'm like, I'm not going to steal it.
Right.
Like I work down the street. I'll return the stuff. Anyway, it's a different now I work in the county where I do go to the county library and I get stuff out all the time. But anyway, I just look at the covers and they're fun. Like that stuff. Now every cover is just Instagrammable, like bold colors and words. Like there's very few illustrations anymore, like detailed illustrations, which again, I like a variety, diversity matters, Joe. And that's good for book covers. And I'm serious though. Like I think that's a lost art, at least in mainstream books that maybe you still see in like, even like the horror genre. A lot of it is just an allusion to something about the book, whether it's like vampires or zombies or whatever, but it's not like these fun, like bombastic covers that used to exist.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I love those, man. So there's a great Twitter account called Paperback Paradise. I don't know if you follow it.
I think I do, but I'll check.
I'll send it to you. But like what this person does is like they take a lot of these old book covers from probably like it looks like from like the 50s through the 80s. Like obscure, but also like really really well painted, very elaborate covers. But then what they do is they just like Photoshop, like they just touch up these things, so it just sounds like it's like the most like random nonsensical bullshit. I mean, it's like turning old book covers into like memes, basically. There's one where anyway, it wouldn't work if I were to describe it to you, but I'll send it your way. But it's pretty damn funny. But anyway, yeah. So I'll get back to the Spiked article here. And the central distinction this Islamist wanted to impose at knife point was apparently between freedom of speech and attacking things that are sacred to him. He would find plenty of agreement with that among those from the UK Labour government downwards, who are effectively pushing to introduce new blasphemy laws to protect Islam from a legitimate criticism they deem Islamophobic. Yeah, that's crazy what's going on in the UK, man. Like I was listening to Andrew Doyle. He's been on a couple of podcasts recently because he just released a book, and he's been talking about it, like just like how anti-free speech England is becoming. I'm not. What's so funny is that first of all, the UK is not a free country, and I said that before. Like when the police are coming to your home and possibly charging you or arresting you or even fining you for things that you write on Twitter or on the internet that again are not threats of violence, that are not like nothing like that, just things that would be considered insensitive or even crass. That's not a free country. Right. Like I don't care if you can open a business or you can marry someone of your same sex. Like that's still not a free country. Right. And I agree that Britain, I mean, this goes all the way back to, I'm sure even before that, but the guy who taught his girlfriend's dog to like Hitler salute. For that. Count Dankula. Yeah.
Count Dankula. And the thing is that like that was specifically Scotland, which these countries, the UK is 4 different countries, they all have different sorts of autonomy, but Scotland is one of those countries where it's sort of like Canada, where the real nationalists there are actually very left-wing. Because my critiques of like countries like Ireland and Scotland are that their whole raison d'existence is just to be anti-England, anti the UK as a whole, and I think that's really lame. Like just like Canada is, and even JJ McCullough, who I like, he's a Canadian YouTuber who I've learned pretty much 100% of my Canadian politics from, and he's like a conservative party there, but much more of like a moderate and probably our politics. But it's really interesting, and he talks about how like and he's actually very pro-America, and how just a lot of Canadian liberalism and being Canadian identity is just to be anti-American. I think that's super lame, and I would not want to be from somewhere their whole reason for being is to just be anti something else. Right.
Yeah, that is gay.
It is.
Yeah,
it's gay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, but I agree. The UK is not a free country. And so, last thing I was going to say is that I think was it Ducey who recently someone brought up at a press briefing, probably 2-3 weeks ago, if we would take in UK refugees who were being persecuted for their speech, which I have been saying honestly for years.
Mm.
And I mean, if this was someone from like Ethiopia who was criticizing their government and going to jail for it, they would like count as a refugee for us.
Right.
Why wouldn't someone from England?
Right.
Like they are like, that should be, and I'm being dead serious about that. We would set the precedent, and it would be like Germany, England, you are like not. You guys are not free countries. I think France is better. I know you don't like when I laud the French, but I do think their free speech is better. Not exactly sure. I mean, they had Charlie Hebdo, and it wasn't the government who shot them in the street.
Yeah, the government just ignored them. But that's true. Like, I don't hear as many instances of the French government cracking down on.
No, because France is more about integration, which is better than multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is a failed experiment, especially in these European countries.
Yep.
America, we do a pretty good job overall of like mostly integration with good parts of multiculturalism. It's like, hey, we like your food, but you're going to respect our laws. You're going to respect our shit. And a lot of people actually like that because they come here and they want to be a part of American culture, where in these other countries, people go there and they don't want to be a part of French culture or English culture or German culture. They want to retain their own culture solely while getting all the benefits of a rich Western democracy.
Right. No, yeah, no, and this is something that Andrew Doyle's been talking about in these recent podcast appearances. And he actually lays down a really good definition of liberalism, and it's sort of because liberalism is like the definition changes depending on which Western country you're in. But he lays down like a really good, like solid foundational sort of classically informed definition of liberalism, and one of the ones that he points to is that it's freedom to do what you want until it starts to infringe on the rights of others. And I think that's where he talks about like how that kind of bumps into multiculturalism. So it's like, it's not so much that if you come to our country from another country, that doesn't mean you have to stop speaking your mother tongue or give up your religious views. You can practice them like in the privacy of your home or in the privacy of others. But you still have to abide by our laws. You cannot start imposing your own views on us. If you come to our country and you start chanting death to whatever country this is, it's like, then you should not be welcome here. Anyway, Andrew Doyle is a fascinating guy, and he's the Titania McGrath dude. So.
Yeah, of course, he's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, but everything I'm saying, I'm sure someone would counter me and say, well, Ben, aren't we talking about an American who just attacked someone for their speech, just like Charlie Hebdo, except it wasn't nearly as horrific because it affected fewer people. But I mean, still horrific, of course, but it wasn't as widespread. I'm looking, is this guy? Yeah, he is a U.S. citizen. So
did he come from another country, or was he born here?
Given his age, and I'm going to assume he was born here. And to be honest, you do see this, I think, a good amount, which is kind of scary. It's like a lot of times in America, the generation that comes here tends to be very pro-American because where they came from, it wasn't as good. They have opportunity here, but then their first generation that is like the second generation that's born in America, they actually tend to, and you saw this a lot with ISIS, where a lot of these soldiers who went to go fight in ISIS came from Western European or Central European countries who were born in those countries, born in Denmark, born in Sweden, born in France.
Yep.
Because they were disillusioned and they were expecting something better because that's what they saw around them. But they weren't succeeding. I think there's a number of reasons for that, where their parents were very pro whatever those countries were.
This is interesting. So he was born in the U.S. He was born in California. Yeah. So he was born in California, and he's I know. He's a dual national, a citizen of both the U.S. and Lebanon. His parents immigrated from Yaroun, Lebanon. So yeah, what the hell, man?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that he's the first generation born here, and they, now with, like, you can get with the internet, everything that comes with good and bad, I think it gets a lot of people different perspectives on good things. Like they see, you know, certain religions are nicer, let's say, and freer than others, and there are more viewpoints out there, so that can have a mollifying effect on some of them. But then if you want to find the craziest shit, like, you can do that also. And then they start associating with other cultures that they have like this connection to, of course, but they're not that exactly, so it gives them purpose. And I'm sure, like, I don't know, but this is more complicated. I don't want to go into a whole like jihadist rant here, because honestly, a lot of like this isn't as simple, and a lot of leftists will always make argument like, oh, well, they're poor and disenfranchised. Like, no, you know how many of the 9/11 attackers were like engineers with advanced degrees? How many of these terrorists are like actually not? They're like business owners and have advanced degrees. They're not like all just poor from the slums. Like, yeah, a lot of them are, but a lot aren't. It's not that simple. And I really, one of the things I can't stand so much about the left is that they never give agency ever to the people who are, you know, committing these sorts of attacks. It's always like someone else's fault. And again, I'm not saying, I also don't always agree with the right either, who it's like they don't ever take into account any other factors. Like it's not always just pure individualism either. But the left, I notice that so often, it's so just nauseating that it's always someone else's fault. It's always some bigger institution, society. And I'm sure with this, it'd be like, oh, well, he was a disenfranchised guy. And, you know, because it says in here, wasn't he getting increasingly isolated? Yeah. Like, I'm sure this guy didn't have a thriving family. And I mean, I don't know, prove me wrong. I'm sure he didn't have like a thriving family, a bunch of like close pals, and was doing real well at work or anything like that. I'm sure he didn't have like great hobbies. Like, he probably just got sucked into this kind of BS and then can make a name for himself by attacking this guy who's had a fatwa on him for 40 years. Yeah. Also, did you say Nasrallah? Huh? Did you say Nasrallah in this?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, well, Israel just took him out.
Oh, Hassan Nasrallah?
The guy from Lebanon?
Yeah.
Yeah, he got taken out like 2 months ago.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, he's a big deal. I thought that was fake at first. I was like, did they really just take out Nasrallah?
Yeah.
Got him.
I'll continue on here. And the central distinction this Islamist wanted to impose at knife point was apparently here we go. In his slurs against Rushdie as a bully, the attempted murderer himself sounds like a violent example of what Julie Burchill brilliantly characterizes as a cry-bully. Those who claim victimhood on the basis of their identity in order to justify attacking, silencing, or even trying to kill those whose views they don't like. Cry-bully, that's good. I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
There's a long history here with Rushdie, of course, who has been under threat of death since Iran's supreme leader, the late Ayatollah Khomeini, issued a fatwa calling for Sir Salman's execution after the publication of his novel, The Satanic Verses, in 1988. Matar had previously said about the author in a 2022 New York Post story, "I don't think he's a very good person. He's someone who attacked Islam." He praised Khomeini for demanding Rushdie's head for writing a book based on the life of the Prophet Muhammad. Just based on that one book he wrote, "I don't think he's a very good person. He attacked my beliefs."
Yeah. Again, the record, Rushdie was like, I don't know if he would, but like, he was a Muslim.
That's right. Yeah.
So that didn't even work out this time. I was like, well, I can say this because I'm a Muslim. Well, apparently not.
Well, I mean, you know, like you see the same sort of attitude here, where it's like when you have black conservatives criticizing like Black Lives Matter or something like that, then it's like, well, then I don't care what your race is now. And then it's, you know, now you're a traitor.
Yeah, it's the Ed Norton meme where he goes from like, you've seen that one where it's like a 4-panel meme, a verbal meme. It's like Ed Norton and what's that movie where he's like the kind of hicky Kentucky guy? Oh my god!
Oh, it's got like fear in the title or something. Like
whatever, that one.
Yeah.
And he's like super sweet, and then it like slowly morphs into Derek Vineyard. Yeah. American History. As a sloppy verbal meme, but it's very funny. It gets used a lot.
Okay, I'm familiar with that one then.
Primal Fear, right? Primal Fear.
Primal Fear. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. No, I mean, but what was it? It's like, you know, religious fanatics, they hate apostates more than they hate.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't say that's religious fanatics. I think that terminology comes from that. But I think like anyone hates, and I do think this is, you know, bipartisan. If you want political parties, like a Democrat or Republican will hate someone who leaves them to go to the other party more than they would hate someone who's been with that other party for their entire life.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's why, you know, and you're right, that is a bipartisan thing, or else, you know, the term rhino wouldn't exist. Republican in name only.
Yeah, right, exactly. I think I forget. I think there's a more like pithy term for it, but like it's not. I'm thinking more of the like the zeal of the convert, but it's not that. It's like the reverse of that somewhat. It's like let me like the hatred of the convert. Yeah, something like that.
Of course, most left liberal levies of the Western cultural elites did not actually endorse the fatwa, but neither did they rally to the defense of Rushdie and freedom of speech. Instead, they tutted about the offensive content of his novel. The long-term abandonment of Rushdie is one of the worst examples of moral cowardice and political betrayal in modern cultural history. Perhaps it was no wonder that almost 35 years after the Rushdie affair, a crazed Islamist could imagine he was doing the right thing by stabbing the author on stage. Yeah, that's true, because there were a lot of tepid defenses from left-wing figures where it's like, yeah, what happened to him was terrible, but he did kind of poke the hornet's nest a little bit, or sort of like, you know, that doesn't justify getting stabbed in the face.
Yeah, to be honest, I remember being really surprised that this happened, because it was kind of like, this is such a throwback.
Yeah,
like to me, this same issue was very very apparent or kind of like clear during the Charlie Hebdo attacks. It's the same concept, and that had a lot more widespread condemnation, but there were still people I remember arguing about who I'm like, wait a minute, you're actually are like somewhat defend. It'd be the same thing, like, well, of course they shouldn't be shot in the street and murdered in their office, but it's like, no, there's no but here.
Right. Exactly.
We don't like in the free world, we don't do this.
Right. Exactly. The sentencing judge, David Foley, at least seemed to grasp the wider significance of the case for freedom of speech. He said it was no coincidence that Matar had tried to kill Rushdie at the Chautauqua Institution, a summer retreat that prides itself on the free exchange of ideas. We all have the right to have our own ideals. We all have the right to carry them, Foley said. But when you interfere with someone else's ability to do that by committing a violent act in the United States of America, that has to be an answerable crime. We might also recall that the only thing Matar said during his trial, in words aimed at the watching media as he entered the court, was "Free Palestine," another familiar obsession of Western liberals. The bizarre suggestion that trying to kill a liberal British Indian novelist in America had something to do with opposing Israel captures the toxic cocktail of anti-Western sentiments that unite Islamists and leftists today.
You know what this reminds me of? When it was kind of the epitome of just like the breakdown of like all these things converging. I remember there were like there's this video of these like two like older white women in an elevator, and this was like during, I think, not like peak masking, but you know, like probably between 2020 and 2022, right?
Yeah.
And like a black guy got in the elevator with them, and he wasn't wearing a mask or something like that, and they started yelling at him and like attacking him, but also yelling "Black Lives Matter" at the same time. Like, they're just so broken, and it's just like a what's it called? Like short circuiting that like they're attacking a black guy. I remember him kind of like laughing because it's like these old white ladies. He's like, "What are you doing? Like, get away from me."
Jeez, man.
Yeah,
that's hilarious. And that shit's still happening too. So you know how like certain like right-wing outlets will have like, you know, like the person going to a college campus and interviewing like dumb, you know, purple-haired idiots, protesters and stuff. There's one where some college student was protesting. Who's that female athlete, the blonde chick, the swimmer? I think they were protesting her.
You mean the one that's been real outspoken about?
Yeah, against Leah Thomas or whatever.
Is it is Riley Gaines?
That's right. Yeah, I think they were protesting her, and they're holding signs and saying Riley Gaines is transphobic or whatever. And like, oh, so why exactly is she transphobic? It's like, oh, well, so, you know, she's against, you know, trans women performing, participating in women's sports. He goes, yeah, but you know, she was in a locker room and there was a biological man with his genitalia out. And then she goes, yeah, that shouldn't have happened. That's true. Right. So, well, then which is it? Like,
yeah.
So
Yeah, those I like. I mean, obviously, those videos show kind of the dumbest people. I think they're kind of old because it's like, well, they're not going to show anyone who actually can give like a cogent argument, right? Like, because there can be like a lot of this. Again, I'm pretty clear on where I stand on that particular issue, of course. But I think with some of these other issues, they just get like dumb college kids who are put on the spot.
Yeah.
Who again, I probably disagree with very much politically.
Yep.
But if someone does give a good counter, like it doesn't have to convince, like, oh, like it's not dunking on them. Like it's not really how the world works, but it's how the internet works. But it could be like a reasonable counter. Like they're not going to show that.
I know
right?
exactly.
They're going to cut that. So anyway.
No, I totally get you. And there's definitely like a sensationalist element to that, where it's like, and the way they always title these videos too, where it's like woke,
totally
blue hair gets destroyed. So
ponage.
Right, exactly. But yeah, I just brought that up just like an example of like, well, you're making two different arguments here, but yeah. So anyway. As public confirmation of this unholy alliance, shortly after Matar was jailed for trying to murder Rushdie, student protesters in California prompted him to pull out of his planned keynote speech at Claremont McKenna College's commencement ceremony. His crime? Criticizing pro-Palestinian U.S. campus protests for not taking a stand against Hamas. I feel that there's not a lot of deep thought happening, Rushdie told German broadcaster RBB last year about the demonstrations. There's an emotional reaction to the death in Gaza, and that's absolutely right. But when it slides over towards anti-Semitism and sometimes to actual support of Hamas, then it's very problematic. The student protesters effectively agreed with the Islamist would-be assassin that Rushdie should not be allowed a platform for such insulting opinions. Yeah, I mean, he's taking like the most like middle-of-the-road stance on this.
Don't support terrorist groups.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, have empathy for victims in Gaza. That's totally fine. Just don't support terrorism.
What is the like? When is the sheen of higher education going to fade? Of people like, why, if you're Salman Rushdie, right?
Yeah.
Does he win a Nobel Prize? I think he has.
Maybe
a Pulitzer. Like he's an extremely talented writer.
Yeah.
As probably the pinnacle of successes you can get as a novelist.
Yep.
Highly respected. Why do you even go give the commencement speech at Claremont McKenna?
Yeah.
Who gives a shit? Like it's a good school, I know. And I thought Claremont McKenna was somewhat moderate for liberal arts in California. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're a different school.
Yeah.
And again, you also don't know because maybe these schools, like, it could just be a few loud voices, threatening loud voices, which again, if these administrations didn't have the spines of wet noodles, they could just handle this somewhat easily, but a lot of them don't. Or a lot of them do. But I'm like, when is that going to feel like Jerry Seinfeld, for instance, has said like, I just don't perform at colleges anymore. Yeah. The juice doesn't seem worth the squeeze. Like, right. I don't know. I just find it weird. Like, who gives a shit?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he's definitely like an old school guy, so maybe maybe he's still kind of like, I still want to encourage young brilliant minds, but no, you're right though. Where it's sort of like it just doesn't have the same.
At least make like Stanford.
Yeah,
like Claremont McKenna's a very good school. I do think it's usually ranked some of the highest, like small liberal arts schools. I get it, yada yada. I went to a small liberal arts school, so I get it, and I loved my school. But I wouldn't be, if I was getting attacked for, and I'm like, all right, fuck it, I'll go somewhere. People who would like now it's so easy to, especially if you have a following or you have and somewhat name recognition, like go talk to people who are actually going to enjoy what you have to say. Right. Like you can do that so easily now with social media and with podcasts and everything like that. Like, I don't know. I'm just wondering when that's because it feels like it's somewhat fading, but when that's really just going to be like college is going to have to be begging people to give commencement speeches. And
the only person who's going to be willing to do them is be like Stephen King or some shit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Stephen King probably does the University of Maine like every year.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude. And I'm looking at Salman Rushdie's political views, and he's like, he's very left wing, so it's not like
Yes, of course. But that doesn't. But like that doesn't matter. Like that's what we've learned. It doesn't matter. You could be right on this. Same thing with Bill Maher. Yeah. And he's to this day. And actually, what attracted me to Bill Maher back in the mid 2010s was this kind of stuff. Was his like very openness about how. And he's like, no, not all the religions are the same. Like there's a strain of Islam that's much more power in these like yes, there are Christian fundamentalists, but they don't run countries. Right. They don't have like they're not blowing up. They're not blowing themselves up. They're not shooting people in the street like for these things. Yes, there are right-wing terrorist attacks. Yes, there are. I get it, but it's not this same thing. They're not taking over cities in the Middle East. Yeah. Funded by our so-called allies. These Gulf states.
Right. Exactly.
But anyhow.
And I'll just finish off the article here. Back in 1989, when the protests against Rushdie's The Satanic Verses erupted in Britain and worldwide, I wrote an editorial in the now long-deceased Living Marxism magazine entitled Defend the Right to be Offensive. Some 35 years later, the Rushdie case should remind us that it has never been more important to take a stand for unfettered free speech with no buts. Yeah, the buts...
pro butts, but no butts.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that is really annoying.
I feel terrible. Like it seemed like I remember this happened. I'm like, really? Rushdie in 2022, right? 2022. Yeah. Like, man, that really sucks. Yeah. Because, like, oh my God, that seemed like something that just like, no one's ever gonna act on that anymore. Like that's old news. But
right. Yeah, that's crazy how potent a lot of these Islamist ideas are.
Like the Pope isn't telling followers to go kill people. Like that's not happening. Like this was the leader of a huge Muslim majority country.
Right. You see the Pope saying, "Hey, actually, I think Galileo was wrong. We're going to take back our apology from 1992 or whatever."
Yeah. He's not like ordering violent. In fact, I wish sometimes the popes were a little more like, yeah, you can defend yourselves. Like you can stand up for what you think is right. Like that's fine. Like there is, I think, such thing as just war. Right. Like if you're going to defend, like, look, don't get me going on a Crusades kick here right now. Yeah. But like there's I'm of the belief the Crusades were completely justified and also caused horrible atrocities. Like both of those things are true. So we can get into that on another day. I'm happy to discuss it. But anyway, should we do Reckless Rex?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually do. So I've been getting into the blues a lot lately, the last month or so. I've always been
You see Sinners?
No, but I'm dying to. I heard that there's a musical sequence in there that's killer.
It's great.
So yeah, that's definitely on my list.
About the blues,
But I've always been a fan of the blues, but I've been really taking
me too.
Like the playing of blues guitar more seriously, as well as and same thing like I've been familiar with a lot of famous blues artists, but like one of those things where it's like I know a few songs from each of them, but like I wanted to kind of do a deeper dive. So the first one who I really did a deeper dive into is B.B. King. I thought that would be kind of a safe bet. So I went all the way back to his very first full-length album from 1957 called "Singin the Blues." It's funny, it's an amazing album, but it does crack me up, like how unimaginative a lot of these old, like the titles are, because it'll be like B.B. King sings the blues, and then like, B.B. King sings the blues again, and then just
my wife left me, and I'm sad about it.
Exactly. So, but it is a wonderful album, and it's one of those things where it's like this is his first album, and it feels. I mean, obviously it's dated by today's standards, but it's a very accomplished album. Like, but like the way it worked back then was that like full-length albums were not quite as prevalent at the time, because usually it was like you just released single after single after single, and then you would do an album that collected all the singles. So I was like, oh man, like this album kills. Like it's a killer album, and this is his first thing. It's like, oh no, he'd been on the scene for like 10 years before this. Like this just collects a lot of those singles. But B.B. King, Singin the Blues. Not much to say except it's just killer. old school blues, and he's playing with electric guitar, so it's kind of like a crossover between rock and early R&B.
Yeah.
So I dig it, man. So it's been an influence on me.
I love BB King. Speaking of my small liberal arts college, I took the history of jazz in college, and while blues and jazz are different, I'm much more of a fan of blues. Like that blues was covered in that class, and I really learned a lot about.
There's a lot of overlap between the two.
Sure. Like Mississippi Fred McDowell, BB
similar
King.
origins and stuff.
Sure, and then we also like Louis Armstrong, Jelly Roll Morton, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Also like Louis Prima and Dixieland Jazz Band and all that. But that was I actually took from that class enjoying the blues much more than the jazz stuff, Miles Davis and the like.
Yeah.
What was the California jazz called? It was like, or West Coast.
Yeah, there's West Coast blues and there's cool blues.
Yeah. But like I thought the California one had like a certain name to it, but I'm forgetting what it was.
Anyway.
As
far as I know, the West Coast blues or West Coast jazz is a real thing, but I don't know that there's like a nickname for it.
Yeah, not Blue Eyed Soul, but it was something. It was like more white dudes. I can't. Maybe not. But was Miles Davis West Coast?
I'm not sure.
I don't remember.
No. Anyway, so BB King Singing the Blues from 1957, a great early blues rock album. So check it out. Well, and he did one really cool thing where he would sing and then he would like play a lot, like so it's almost like he's having like a duet with his guitar.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was a very cool thing that he did. So yeah.
Yeesh. Well, mine, I'll say, even though I just started it, I already know I love it and I can recommend it. And it's I'm in mourning today, Joe, because you know what today is?
No.
May 29th. May 29th.
French thing or something?
No. Oh. It is the May 29th, 1453 was the fall of Constantinople.
Yeah, French. It's a French thing, yeah.
Those Ottoman bastards and the end of the Byzantine Empire. And I told you, I think last episode, I'm just gonna write about the Byzantine Empire. Eventually, I'm doing lots of research, and I started my first book. Obviously, I've been doing podcasts and YouTube videos, but I'm doing John Julius Norwich's book. So he did a 3-parter. This is called Byzantium: The Early Centuries. So I'm only about 70 pages in, but I already love it. I love his style. And I highly recommend it. And so that's my Reckless Wreck is this book, but really just the Byzantine Empire in general. It is, I think I've heard it even called like the Forgotten Empire. It is so interesting. There's so much intrigue and like a lot of, I don't think people realize the impact it's had on Game of Thrones, like King's Landing, and a lot of the characters are like all of this family intrigue and backstabbing and ornate, like it's just such an interesting time period that really the classicists of the Enlightenment poo-pooed. I know that I always forget his name. I read his books in college for my Roman history class, but the English guy who wrote about the Roman, like he wrote the history, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, not Gooding or Goodson or whatever that guy is. People know him. He hated the Byzantines. Like so many classes hated the Byzantines because they were considered like the medieval era, which the Enlightenment people hated because they want to go back to the classicism era, where I'm a medievalist. I love the medieval era and I like the ancient and antiquity, but I love the Gothic art and I love the Byzantine Empire is so they're battling all these different fronts and they're making alliances and they have such an impact on today's culture. Like the entire civil code of maybe half the world, not us because we are based off the common law, which comes from the UK, but like mainland Europe, the Roman code, the civil code was also called the Napoleonic Code. That all comes from that comes from Justinian, that comes from the Byzantines. Because the Byzantines, if you went back in time and you went up to one of them and were like, "Hey, you're a Byzantine, right?" They would say, "What are you talking about? Like, what's a Byzantine? We're the Romans." So like they very much considered themselves Romans. Because they were, in a sense, like it was that continuation. When the West fell, the Byzantines soldiered on. And I just think it's this underappreciated time in history. I think when a lot of people think of the medieval era, they think like, I always think of the scene in Monty Python, The Holy Grail, where it's like peasants hitting mud on the ground and they're dirty and filthy. And there's and it's like, well, there was some of that, but there was also a lot more art and science and reading that was going on and literature that was going on. No, what was it? And a lot of that was Western Europe, was really in the quote unquote dark age. And a lot of that comes from dark as in there just weren't as many sources. There's not a lot of light shed on that era. Doesn't mean that people just forgot everything that happened during the Roman times and that, everyone just started living in huts again. There was some of that, but there was also the continuation and in the East, it never fell until May 29th, 1453, when eventually the Ottomans took Constantinople. I've been to Istanbul, great city. I have my issues with the Turks. I don't like how Erdogan made the Hagia Sophia, which was the greatest church in all of Christendom, into a mosque again when it had been a museum for like 100 years. But, that aside, the Turks, they're very friendly and it's a very cool, great city. And I plan to go back soon. So anyway, look like if you're into medieval history at all, again, I love Kingdom of France stuff. I love the different Italian states. I love all that stuff. I love like learning about the Caliphate,
Aztecs,
stuff.
Mayans.
Yeah, well, not no, they're fine.
California missionaries.
That's more like age. Like this is pre that. That's like Age of Exploration. That's really where the cutoff comes. When I think of a lot of people, where's the Middle Ages? It's really like end of Western Rome to like this, like the very very late 15th century. That era in between there, and like don't overlook the Byzantines. It's a very cool era. A lot of stuff comes out of that. And I think if you're really just focusing on like the Vikings and England and all that stuff's really cool too. I love all of it, but don't overlook the Byzantines.
Right. So
Byzantine Empire, my reckless.
I was about to say
the Byzantine Empire. Yes. Also, I guess to be more specific, this particular book by John Julius Norwich, who is like one of these great English historian writers who has, just very well respected and super easy to read. It's not dense. It's not the
Satanic Verses. No,
it's not the Satanic Verses. But it is a total. I started yesterday, which is like the last, I guess, full day of the Byzantine Empire, and that was total coincidence. I thought I was like, oh wow.
Interesting. And what's the book called?
It's just called Byzantium. The early centuries. He broke it into 3, so it goes from like the early 300 or late 3rd century, which I like because you have to kind of lay the groundwork. Like Constantine was, this was still like Rome, where he went to Byzantium, which then became Constantinople, which then became Istanbul after it fell. But he has like lay the groundwork. But really, I consider the Byzantine Empire and what it has been kind of put onto it from more like modern age historians, it's kind of like fall of Western Roman Empire, where it became its own sort of thing, like 476 to 1453. So again, when you look at it that way, the Roman Empire continued for almost another 1,000 years, which no one thinks of that.
Right. You can now buy Sydney Sweeney's used bathwater.
That's my reckless racket. I kind of love. Is that real?
Yeah,
I've been seeing that today, and that feels like this is kind of reminds me of like almost a Timothy Chalamet thing, where it's like it's very like in your face. Like this is like, no, I'm just gonna capitalize on this. I'm not gonna hide behind social justice to make money. It's like, no, I'm hot. Men will pay for my bathwater. Yeah. What's it cost? Just
good question.
I don't.
Yeah, I don't have
it. Is it Dr. Squatch? Is that real?
Yeah, it is Dr. Squatch.
Oh, I've had my mom both. So I actually, fun fact about co-host Ben is I actually love soap. So it's like a great stocking stuffer for me. So like my wife, my mother-in-law, my mom. So for Christmas, I literally got a box of Dr. Squatch. I still have it. Like I have another bar. So that lasts me basically from January to June because I have one more bar after this one's almost done. So like I've been using Dr. Squatch this whole time, and I can't believe they're the ones who are doing the Sydney Sweeney bathwater soap.
Yeah, there's a giveaway, and then they're gonna sell some.
How's that verified?
I don't know. It's like, can you give me a video of that?
Like, does it get numbered? Do they like show it?
No.
Just wondering. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's
not that I know.
In the late 1970s, Kiss, the band members, they had a comic book based on them, and then they pricked their fingers and put some of their blood into the ink that was used for the comic books.
Yeah. Who's the band that did their like cocks and wax or whatever it was, like the molds?
Oh,
their dicks.
I don't know. It's either like I'm thinking like some naked band like Blink-182 or Red Hot Chili Peppers.
No. It was definitely before that age. It was definitely like the like hair band.
Oh, it sounds like a Motley Crue thing to do.
It was like a Motley Crue. I thought that's what you were going to say, but maybe I don't think Kiss would probably do that. Seems like more of a Motley Crue or Poison or something.
Yeah. All right.
Not that I need any of those.
Yeah. All right, Benjamin.
All right.
So, and dear listener, fight the crits and stay reckless.
Stay reckless.